because this is a scenario we're seeing a lot in our schools around the state, and not just those folks on the call, but really, and I'll read it to you, but for 3 meetings in a row, a member of the governance board has asked to see financial statements of the school. The school leadership continues to respond that the charter school uses a fiscal agent to manage the funds, and the charter leader can also, just really contends that the fiscal agent's really good and has it all under control. So we don't necessarily need to see those finances at the charter school board level. And so as we go through this presentation, I just sort of want you to think about what are the roles, what are the responsibilities, and where all are the autonomies in a charter school around school finance. What should the relationship look like between a fiscal agent and a charter school? Who holds the assurance and who holds the execution? And then who is accountable for the school's finances? At the end of the day, who's on the hook for that? To really be thinking about that in kind of in your own schools as well. So to jump in, here's on the DPI website, here is the federal definition of a charter school. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is not because folks on the call here, you don't know, but I think sometimes we lose sight of really what a charter school is. And when we look at it, it really is a business-like contract between a governance board and a sponsoring school board or another charter entity in some of our independent authorizers. And really, it's autonomy as an enabling condition, right, for our for greater educational effectiveness, right? So we're basically giving autonomy to enable more effectiveness, and a charter school is granted that authority by the contract. But again, the contract is between the governance board and the authorizer. And with autonomy is accountability, and that's sort of like our charter motto here in Wisconsin. Now let's jump in to see what that looks like in more of an infographic. So we have our charter school governance authorizers, right? And then we have our charter governance board. In the middle there, you can see that there is a contract, and the specifics of the contract is what lays out the autonomies that charter school is given. And then hopefully in that contract, it is also spelled out very clearly what results the authorizer is expecting. Student learning results, financial sustainability results, and then obviously operational performance, which is, are you making sure that you're following the law? The autonomies are also clearly spelled out, and we get a lot of calls from schools to ask, is it okay for us to hire our own staff? Or is it okay for us to make a decision around our calendar? Or can we be offering music or not offering music if we're a church? A lot of that is going to come back to what does it say in your contract? Because that is where it needs to be laid out on what the autonomies are that you're trading for results. Let's look at that from a flow of autonomy, because I think these questions are also brought to Sarah and I a lot. And so the first piece that a governance board or that the charter school is held accountable to is the federal government, right? There's obviously a constitution, there's IDEA, there's ESSA accountability. For all of you on this call, there are specific federal grant requirements. So how it plays out for you all a lot is the open and equitable enrollment. So what are our enrollment procedures and our lottery process, and how do we, well, yeah, that's all federal government. Your board makeup can't have district or employees of the authorizer on your boards, right? Well, that's a federal government thing. Then the next level down is our state of Wisconsin. We have specific charter law and specific open meeting law in the state of Wisconsin. We also have licensed teachers. What does that mean to be a licensed teacher? So when we're wondering what kind of teacher can we hire, the state of Wisconsin sort of overseeing that piece. We go down to our charter authorizer. Again, I've kind of hit on that contract being really important for what can we do. A lot of you on this call have adopted your authorizer's policies and procedures. Well, the governance board should still really know what those policies and procedures are, because if you've adopted them, you need to follow them. Otherwise, you are not only breaking contract, but potentially breaking the law. And then the last piece is, as a governance board, you are also held accountable to your own bylaws, your own policies that you may have written that are different than what you've adopted, and then any specific waivers that you have written that your authorizer has received. So this plays out, we get calls about certain recruitment practices or board makeup, and can I change that? Well, yeah, if you change your bylaw, then you can operate differently. But otherwise, it really goes back to what your bylaw states and how you can operate. All right, so roles and responsibilities. I just was talking to Sarah Hackett today on the phone, and a lot of the conversation she's having around the state at all of our charter schools is who's responsible for what, right? I mean, why do some responsibilities we have 4 people doing it, and then there's other things that we don't have anybody doing it, and who's responsible for that? So hopefully this addresses a little bit, but again, if you want to dig up and roll your sleeves up a little bit with dig in with Sarah and I, please reach out to us, and we can go site by site with this. But overall, again, authorizer and governance board, there's a contract relationship, right? The authorizer is oversight, assurance, and monitoring. And it's based on what it states, what that assurance is, what that level of learning is in the contract. The governance board is really overseeing the actual charter school, and they should be responsible for budget, the student learning, leader evaluation, and then really making sure that they're governing by policy. There's a couple other lines here though. In our state, a lot of times our charter schools are buying services back. Sometimes those services are bought back from the actual authorizer, and that's transportation, that's food service, that's special education oversight if you're not an independent entity. Or we're buying back services from a service provider, such as a CISA, and we're buying HR services and or other leadership services, maybe a principal license. Well, those are almost separate contracts, and that's why I have other contracts in this infographic for you. That's different than the authorizer has a contract, and in that contract, it's really just, this is what we expect you to do in return for us giving you autonomy. Then the charter school and the governance board decides to go into other contracts to say, hey, we need help managing our money. So we're gonna buy back that service and you're gonna be our fiscal agent. But at the end of the day, the governance board is responsible for those contracts because ultimately they're responsible to make sure that the budget is being met and that learning is happening at the school level. One other way to look at it, and I just wanna, there's a lot of responsibilities and roles here, and we'll be sharing this PowerPoint, so I'm not gonna read everything to you. But the big one in this, again, in the hot topic is who assures, who insures, and who executes, right? So your authorizer is assuring a lot of things in that contract. Your governance board is ensuring that the leadership is getting that done, but the leadership of the school, and I use the word leadership, not principal, because we have lots of different makeups in our schools around the state, but they're the executioner. Governance board shouldn't be executing, right? That's a conflict there. And authorizer shouldn't get into necessarily the governance of the school and what specific autonomies are being asked. And so sometimes when we cross those lines, that's when we have some conflict. So if you haven't at your own sites really laid these out, and you can use this as a guide if you'd like, or if you want to talk to us at Works to help you with that, on what those roles and responsibilities are for each of those different kind of stakeholders of your charter school, that's super important to do so. Another way to kind of look at this is it's not always as clean as lines, right? And we know that. Relationships are messy, and so there is overlap, and so there is some give and take, and it's not always overly clear. But there are certain things that governance boards are expected to be, that is their responsibility. There are very similar things for the authorizer, and then we do share performance measures. That's in the contract, right? We do have overlap, and those should be spelled out in your contract again. Making sure that if the authorizer has an overall vision for the district or for their charter schools, how is that being fulfilled by the individual charter schools that have their own missions and visions? And that needs to be articulated. And a lot of times that's articulated in where the program is laid out. But again, you're gonna need to make sure that that's communicated because that can cause some friction. Let's look at special education. That's another one that our phone typically rings on for. And charter schools, they can contract out for special education support, but cannot contract out the responsibility of a free and appropriate education. Well, how does that look for our different types of schools in the state? For district authorized charter schools that are on the call here, you have an LEA, a local educational agency. That group is responsible for free and appropriate education for your students. So charter schools that are that are being authorized by a school district, there needs to be an LEA at your IEP meetings. No matter how unique your school is, at the end of the day, who's responsible to make sure that each of your students that have IEPs are getting the appropriate services? It's the LEA that's on the hook for that. For independent authorized schools, your charter governance board is your own LEA. So they're the ones that are on the hook. So who is that representative of your LEA that is at those meetings, ensuring and assuring that every student is receiving, a free and appropriate public education in a least restrictive environment? Again, you can decide to bring in a CISA to help provide some of those services, or a different agent, but you cannot contract away that ultimate responsibility of the LEA. So going back to our scenario, right? So 3 meetings have passed. Board's been asking, where are the financial statements? Oh, don't worry, the fiscal agent's got that all under control. Well, the roles here are, yes, fiscal agent is an expert in school finance. The WISE grant stuff and making sure that you are that you're pulling from them in an appropriate way. Yeah, that takes some expertise that you can hire out for. That governance board could be in contract. And I know it's messy with some of our instrumentality charter schools. Your fiscal agent is your school district. Sure, they're an expert at that, but the governance board is still responsible. The autonomy should be, hey, you're doing things a little bit differently, but this is the only money that you can give, but we'll let you do things differently, but it's still this per pupil basis. But the responsibility for you as a charter school should be looking at those finances and making sure that you're meeting your budget, that your expenses are appropriate, and that you are, you're tracking your liabilities. And so those relationships, I can't tell you exactly how it should play out, but that needs to be a pretty important conversation between the governance board, the school leader, and then whoever your fiscal agent is, on how those budgetary reports are being delivered to the board so that they can stay on top of that. And a question that typically comes up, well, what kinds of reports should we be getting to understand this? And I believe in kind of 4 reports, a balance sheet. And again, I can work with you specifically on these, but a budget versus actual. So are you tracking what you originally thought your budget was? What cash flow you have? School finance is super interesting and hard to explain, where you don't always have the money in the bank. And so it's important for your governance board to know if you have the money, or do you need to take out a short-term loan in order to cover expenses because that money hasn't come in from the state or the feds yet. And then obviously like an income and expense report, like are the right incomes coming in? And then when you're writing checks, which I'm sure you're giving authority to your school leader, are those checks being written appropriately? And are they, and you should be kind of looking over those types of things. Your fiscal agent should be able to provide a report or some form of those reports. But at the end of the day, in order to truly be an autonomous school, which is what charters are, you should have control and oversight over those budgets. Before I pass it back off to Chanel, again, this was a very brief overview. I wanted to make it relatively quick, being here in February, and I'm sure a lot of you maybe want to at least get some sun on your face before the end of the day. Please reach out to us. Let us know how we can support any of what I've just explained, or want us to dig deeper for you. It's not about being perfect, at least not in my world, because I'm not, but it is about being a little better than we were yesterday. So if there's ways that we can slowly move towards fulfilling the autonomies that you explained, either in your DPI charter grant or in your contract, we're definitely here to support.